Hello there all my lovely jewelry makers, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this Wirework Infinity symbol that you can use in so many different ways. So whether that's for necklaces, bracelets, earrings, chains, whatever you can think of really. So I'm just going to show you the basic technique of how to make one, and then you can customize it to use it for whatever you want to. Now, if you like what I do on my channel here and you want to support me, you can of course always like, share and subscribe, and you can also join to become a member of the channel where you can gain early access, exclusive content and other things. You can click join down below, and I do also have a Patreon if you want to join me over there. Again, the link will be down below. Otherwise, if you want to learn how to make this infinity symbol, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we're going to need. Now all we need are two different gauges of wire for this, and the first one here is a 1mm. This is going to be the base wire. And then I'm using a 0.3mm, which will be the weaving wire. Now you can easily play around with the gauges of wire that you want to use. For instance, if you want to make a smaller infinity symbol, you can for instance use thinner gauge wires to match that. So maybe a 0.8mm for the base wire and a 0.25mm for the weaving wire. And of course, if you want to make it larger, you can also use thicker gauges. And then aside from this, you just need whatever material suits what you want to turn this into. So whether it's chain for a necklace, maybe cord for a macrame bracelet, or anything else you can think of. Then as for the tools, we of course need to be able to cut our wire. So I've got some flush cutters, tweezers and nose pliers to help manipulate the wire, 6-step bell making pliers for any loops we need to make. You can also use round nose pliers for this of course. And finally some other bell making pliers to help shape the actual infinity shape itself. Now of course this all depends what size you want to make it, and also you can literally use whatever you have around the house or any form of mandrel that you have that has the size and shape that fits the piece you want to make. Now like usual, you can always find the tool and material list in the description box down below, along with useful links as well. Otherwise, let's get it all ready and let's get started. So the lengths of wires that we'll need is first of all about 40 centimeters of our 1mm here, so this is the base wire. And then I'm working with about 3 meters of a 0.3mm here for the weaving wire. Now of course this might be different whether you're making it larger or smaller. So we're going to start grabbing the base wire here, so the 1mm in this case, and also the pliers or whatever mandrel you're using for your shape. I'm using the smallest step on these here, and that's about 12mm. Now grab your wire, and then I'm just placing it in my pliers here, roughly in the middle, but it doesn't have to be precise. Then I'm going to start bringing one of the ends here all the way around to almost a full circle, but I'm going to overlap the wires like this so they cross over, and then before flattening them fully against the pliers here to get a full circle, I'm going to leave this little gap where they cross over. So this is going to be 1/2 of the infinity shape. Now pick whatever end of the wire is the longest one, and then place your pliers on that right next to where that crossover point is, as close in as you can kind of get it there. Then take that length, bring it around to basically create the same shape here as we just did on the other side. And what I'm just going to make sure of is to bring this wire in the same direction as the other one here. So in this case I'm bringing it underneath, because the other wire is going underneath here on that crossover point, so that they end up laying right next to each other like that. And then you can do any final adjustments. You can roll it if you want to make it a bit smaller, or roll it outward if you want to make it a bit larger, just so we have the two sides as even as possible. And this is our basic infinity shape. Now what we're going to do is use the shapes that we've already made to basically make the outer edge of the shape. So that's what we're going to use the ends that we have left for. So I'm just going to then put my fingers on the wires here where they are laying right next to each other. So make sure they stay next to each other like this, and then I'm going to one side at a time start to bring this straight leg of wire around, basically following the shape that we already made. And what we just need to do as well, if we're making little loops, so we can, for instance, you make it a pendant, so we have something to attach it to, then we just need to remember to do that. And I'm just going to use my 6-step bell making pliers for that. So of course you want to think about where you want to place them. If you want to place them right in the middle on either edge, of course you want to do it there. I'm going to place these a little bit further up on both sides just to make it more of a pendant style, but of course place them wherever you need to. So place your pliers and then basically away from the infinity shape, start bringing the wire around and cross over itself. We get a full circle on this one and have it come back out in the direction that it was going before. We've then just literally added in a little circle there, which is then how we're gonna make this into something wearable in this case. So just make sure you're happy with how it's placed and how it looks, and the size and everything. Then you want to get back to putting your fingers where the wire is basically starting to go straight out there, and then continue bringing it all the way around, following that original shape that we made. Make sure you're happy with how it looks, and then all the way into the middle here, and I'm going to make sure to cross it so this wire ends up on the same side as the one that's crossing, and it's on its own there. So we have two wires crossing on that side, but on the other side we have one for now, but as we bring this around, that's going to make it two, and then just have it come straight out in this direction for now. And that has basically completed this side of the infinity shape. Now we need to just flip it around, do the same thing with the other side, and of course on this side also remember to add that little loop, but here we're doing it as we come further around as opposed to the first, you could say, little corner. So just remember to stop and add that loop in if you're doing it, wherever you're doing it. So I'm going to do it in this corner here so it matches up with the one on the other side. And I'm going to use my pliers to create that circle and try and get it in as much the same place as possible. Bring the wire all the way around, create that full circle, and then before I get too much further, I like to just check if I'm happy with the placement, because you can just adjust it a bit while you're here if you need to. And I think it needs to come down a little bit, so if you need to change it, what I do is basically put your pliers back in and then just roll that circle that we just made down if you need to change it that direction, or you can roll the other way if you need to move it that direction. So that is kind of how you can adjust the placement while you're here, of course, ideally, and just kind of adjust it however you need to until you're happy with it. So I think something like this looks pretty good for mine. But then again, just like the other side, go back to bringing this wire around and make sure we bring this on the same side as the other tail is there, the loose end of the wire. So that means in this case, I'm bringing it underneath with how I'm holding this, and just bring it so it comes straight next to the other one. So now on that side, we actually have three wires next to each other, and just coming out in the opposite direction to the first one there. Now this is our basic infinity shape in place with our base wire. Now we need to start fastening all this in place, but before we do, what I like to do is just get these ends a little bit out of the way, because they can be a bit in the way, and I find it also helps hold a little bit if we just position them a little bit better. So for whatever side you start with, I'm going to just open it up a little bit, try and keep the shape as much as possible in place, bring the end through that loop on the infinity symbol, bring it back into place, straighten it out however you need to, and the same with the other side. Open it up gently and just get the end through that loop coming out on the other side. And then what I like to do is just fasten this initially in place, so not fully, but just so it's a little bit more fastened, because obviously it's quite movable right now and wants to move a little bit all over the place. So I like to hold the middle here as much in place as possible, and then bring one of these ends at a time around these wires in the middle, and then kind of wrapping around them like that. Not too tight though, because we can then still just adjust if we need to while we're weaving, because obviously what you'll see as well, just repeat the same thing on the other side here, is that when we made this shape, you can see that they're not perfectly laying flat next to each other. There's a bit of a gap, which is actually what we want because we need to have that space for our weaving wire. But you could maybe find that at some point it's a little bit too tight to get your weaving wire through. Then you don't want to tighten these too much, so we can still move them a little bit if we need to adjust anything as we go and do the weaving, just in case it's a little bit too tight or something like that. So this is basically where we're at with the base wire, and now we need to start doing the weaving. And for that we need to get the weaving wire out that we cut ready, and what I'm going to do is find both ends and put them together, because from our piece here that we made, we're going to actually start weaving from the middle and then use one end at a time to work our way out on either side. So we also want to start roughly from the middle of our weaving wire here. So put the ends together and then just find where that midpoint is, and then bring in your infinity shape. So what we're going to do is start weaving, like I said, from the middle. So basically where the three wires are next to each other, just in the middle there. And we first of all just want to connect this. Now this is also the most fiddly part to weave, so once you get past this little middle area, it's much easier to weave the rest. But first of all, we of course need to attach this, so we are focusing on these three wires in the middle, where we have one going all the way across and then the two ends that go to the other side through either gap there. So that is the part we're going to start weaving, and what I'm going to be using is a diagonal wire weave. Now of course it's the most fiddly because we have them kind of wrapping around the other wires and that as well. But try and just focus on those three wires, and then you kind of got to push your weaving wire in and out through whatever gaps you have to get it in the right position. So I'm just putting it down underneath all those three wires there, and then just pulling it all the way through just to get it in position to start with first of all, and get it to that midpoint. And then we need to first of all wrap around the bottom wire here by itself. So like I said, we're just focusing on those three. Try and kind of ignore the rest, except for obviously weaving your wire in and out where we need to. So I'm just first of all going down between these two wires that are forming this side of the infinity symbol. So it's just wrapping around this bottom wire by itself. Next we need to go over the top of the bottom one and the middle one. So that means I'm just going to push it through that gap on the one side and bring it down behind. Now what we then need to do is come up between the two wires here, forming this side of the infinity shape, and gently pull that through. Make sure if you see any kinks forming, try and catch them and undo them before they form. Push that down, so this is now coming up between these two wires, and the last wire we have of the three in the middle here is actually the one that's coming out as the end of the wire there, and it's the outer wire on the other side. So we need to go over the top of the middle and that one, which means we need to come underneath from the top here to go under that wire. Just pull it all the way through. So sometimes, as you can see, I'm kind of using a little curved bend I put into the wire like this and pushing that through. I find that easier, and then pulling it all the way through there. And then sometimes, of course, in this little area you'll have to go all the way to the end of the wire and kind of feed that through whatever gap you have, but just do whatever you need to. So the final wrap we need to do for this round of the weave is that top wire by itself, and for that I need to come up through this gap here to be able to go over that top one by itself. And again, to wrap around I need to come all the way to the end of my weaving wire and come down through the same gap here behind those three wires that we are focusing on wrapping around now, but in front of the two that are crossing behind the back of them. and then all the way down behind them, pulling that all the way through, nice and gentle. So again, I could see a kink was going to form there if I just kept pulling, so just make sure to avoid that. We don't want to damage the wire if we can help it. Get that into position, and then pull that, and this is now a full round of the weave that we'll be working with. So we basically just need to repeat this until we filled in this little space in the middle where we just have the 3 wires next to each other. So that is the first part. So we literally just want to do this until there is no more space to weave. So now it's attached as well. What I'm going to do first is wrap around the bottom one, which means come down between the 2 base wires that are forming this side of the infinity shape. Push that down, so that's a single wrap there. Then wrap over the top of both of those wires, so down through that gap. Come up between the 2 we just wrapped over the top of. And then also use that to help push it down nice and tight. Now wrap over the top of the middle one of the 3, and then the top one, which is the one that's coming from the other side. And this is where I need to then come to the end of the wire and just feed that down behind. And this is also mainly this reason really why I said kind of not quite finish off these ends of the base wire yet, but also wrap them around, but make sure it's not too tight, just so we have enough space here to be able to feed our wire in and out whenever we need to get our weaving in the right place here. And then the final wrap in this round is to wrap around that top one by itself. So come up through the larger gap and then just feed the end through the same gap we just went through before with that previous wrap. Pull it all the way through, and then just make sure it lays and tightens in the correct place. And then just also make sure your wraps are nice and tight together. You can always use pliers to help do that as well. Just push everything nice and tight together. And I'm pushing it towards this direction here, so I'm starting from that side, working my way towards the other side of this crossover point. Of course, if you're left-handed or something, you could work in the opposite direction, it doesn't matter. But we're just going to cover this little area where we have 3 base wires next to each other. So do that until you have no more space to weave. Now I've ended up making 6 rounds of the weave here. How many you make doesn't matter. What's important is just filling out this space here until you feel like you can't get any more in. So now that we have that covered, that little middle part, what we have are then a length here going towards either side, and we're just going to work with one at a time. So this one here, I'm just going to continue with that because we're already working in that direction. But that is going to continue the weave going all the way around here on this side, and then the other length is going to do the same but on the opposite side. So that is why we started from roughly the middle of the weaving wire. Now it's going to be the same weave but just with 2 base wires instead of 3 right there in the middle. So the basic principle is the same. I'm just going to wrap around the bottom one there by itself by pushing down between the 2, and then pushing that all the way up, and then bringing it up through that gap. So we wrap over the top of both of them, and then come up between the 2 base wires so we can get in position to wrap around the top one by itself, and then bring it through to come all the way back behind the base wires again. So that was 1 round just with the 2 base wires there, and you basically want to continue doing this. Now of course what you will find is the inner wire is a shorter length, or a smaller shape you could say, than the outer wire there. So what you could do to counteract that is when you eventually get to a point where it starts to curve more, you can occasionally add an extra wrap on the outer base wire, so an extra single wrap. For instance, now I would do another wrap around the bottom base wire there before I then complete this round. Kind of in a way you could look at it as an increase on the outer base wire there. Occasionally, you don't have to do it too much, but just a little bit as you're going around when you feel like you maybe need it. So that is something you could do. Just add that kind of increase, you could call it. But otherwise, just continue weaving like this. Of course, we're going to eventually also run into one of our loops there. So I've kept weaving here and I've run into my very first loop, and all we're going to do to basically get around that is, in my case here, my final wrap was on this inner wire, and I'm literally just going to wrap around that by itself until we get to the other side of the loop, and we can pick back up the weave that we were doing around both of the base wires. So just wrap a few times here. So we're basically wrapping, obviously depending how you look at it, underneath the loop, just making our way to the other side of it. And once we reach that, we can literally just start with our weave again. So wrapping around the bottom one here by itself. You can see, push that down, and that then sits nicely on the other side of the loop, then over the top of both of them, to come up between the two, so we can wrap around the top one by itself again. And that has now just picked back up the weave. So just continue all the way around. Of course, if you need to at any point, then add some of those increases on the outer wire there by making just an extra wrap here and there wherever you feel like it's necessary, until you make your way all the way in to where we basically can't wrap anymore. So we make our way back in to the very middle. So now I made it all the way around here. You can see I don't have any more space to weave through the base wires or anything. So what we can do now is get rid of this, because we're done using this weaving wire. Only this one yet though. So just make sure the very last wrap that you've done is around a single base wire. So it's finished off nice and securely. And then on the back here, which is where the ends of the base wire is also wrapping around, cut off the excess and get rid of that. And then just make sure that the little end of wire that's left is pushed down so it's not sticking out and it's going to catch or scratch on anything. So there we go. And that's one side done. And then of course we just need to go over to the other side and basically start the exact same thing. So pick up that length of the weaving wire. We should have about the same length as we had on the other side left, so we can use that to just start the exact same weave here and go straight into the diagonal wire weave by just wrapping around the outer base wire first. Push that down, wrap over the top of both of them, because we're now only focusing on these two. We've already done that middle part where we had 3 base wires, so we don't need to worry about that anymore. Like that. And then come up between the two, so we can wrap around the top one by itself. Just like that. And again, continue with this all the way around, exact same way as I showed you on the other side. Occasionally add in an increase if you feel like you need to. When you run into that loop, just wrap around the inner base wire by itself until you get to the other side. Pick back up the weave until you run out of space on that side as well. So now weaved both sides here and got rid of the wires, and this is what it looks like. Now I just want to mention a couple of things. So what I find is helpful throughout sometimes is use your pliers to basically help guide the wire through, because especially when you're working around these areas, you can't really get very close with your fingers. You can get in closer with your pliers, but also you get a better grip on the wire. So sometimes the base wires here as you go can become a little bit tight, so close together, and then pushing the wire through with your pliers can help with that. But also if you kind of push them apart, I just use my nails to kind of push in between the base wires, obviously as we haven't weaved that area yet, just in case the base wires get a little bit tight. So that's just a couple of tips if you might run into some of the same problems. But then all that's left to do is finish off the base wires here. So I'm going to flip it to the back, and we first of all just want to cut off the excess. So it's wrapping around right there. Just use one at a time, and you want to cut it off so there's just a little bit left beyond that crossover point, and then get rid of that, because what I'm then going to do is take my pliers and just grab the very end of the wire there and basically flick it in the direction towards the other base wire, so it's kind of bending in on itself. And then you just want to squeeze it down, so push it tight there, and then that gets rid of the end of the wire because it's basically butting up against the side of itself. So make sure you can't feel it with your fingers going over it. And of course we just want to do the same with the other end as well. So cut it off, just leaving a short little tail left, enough that we can grab onto it with our pliers and just flick it in towards the other side, and then just push it down. So again, you can see it's bending in towards the side of itself further back. So it's wrapped around the other base wires there, but also then finished off the end nice and neatly. So like I said, make sure you can't feel anything, so it shouldn't catch or scratch on any clothes or skin either. And then all that's left to do is attach whatever you want to the loops here, or use it of course in whatever way you want to as well. So that would mean for this one here, because I'm turning it into a necklace, I'm just going to open a jump ring and then put it through one of those loops and then attach my chain. Close it back up. Of course do the same on the other side. Attach whatever findings, and then you'll have your necklace ready to wear. And you could even obviously of course also just make your own chain or whatever else you want to do with it, which I might actually do for this, make some kind of decorative chain as well. So that's how you make this Wirework Infinity symbol, and you can make it in any size you want to and use it for whatever you want. So just to show you a few different examples here of what you could do with this infinity piece. So a few necklaces I made. This is obviously just kind of what I showed you how to make. And then like I said here, I then made my own chain just to give a bit of a different effect to it and it being quite cohesive. And I also made of course a silver version. Now what I also did was make a different kind of necklace. So this is using the same basic technique, but what I did was only first of all add a loop there on one side right in the middle, and then I made that side smaller than the other side, and then it's hanging with the larger side down, and I added a little bead in the middle there as well to add some sparkle and movement to it. So that's just another example of what you could do with this basic design. So loads of options just in the necklace area. And of course you could also make the infinity symbol there without any loops and just use it in a completely different way. Now what I also did was make several smaller versions, and that's obviously then ideal for say using it for links to turn it into chain. So I think this is really cool as well. Basically this I just then made a bracelet with, but of course you can use it for necklaces or whatever you want to. But these cute little infinity chain links as well. Or in that principle again, you could add a loop only on one side and maybe make it a little charm that would go on a nice charm bracelet, or even as a pendant, or earrings as well. You know, it's quite a cute size for that. And equally, I've also used the individual links here to make some bracelets with, where I again put loops on both sides in the middle, and then I used those loops instead to attach chain. Then I attached some cord and then made some macrame knots here to turn it into macrame bracelets with this nice little link that we made from scratch in the middle, and it gives this really cool effect, almost kind of like friendship bracelets. So I really like that as well. As you can see, there's loads of options with this basic technique for making this infinity symbol. So that's just to give you a few ideas. You can of course do whatever you want to with it yourself, and whatever you choose to use it for, I would love to see what you end up making with it. You can always tag me on social media for anything that you make from any of my tutorials. I always love seeing your results. And please feel free to check out my channel if you haven't already. You can get things like early access, exclusive content, and a bunch of other stuff that you can check out. I'll leave a link to that in the description box below. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.